Welcome to Navajo County Connection. I'm Dawnafe Whitesinger, District 5 Navajo County Supervisor, and today I have two special guests with me to recognize October as Domestic Violence Month. And I'll give them the opportunity to introduce themselves, and we'll start with Roxanne. Good morning, Roxanne.
Good morning. My name is Roxanne Padilla, and I am the Victim Services Manager at the Navajo County Attorney's Office. I manage the Victim Services Department, that's the legal advocacy center for victims of crime in Navajo County. I also am the chairman of the Domestic Violence Fatality Review Board and the director and victim compensation coordinator for our victim compensation program, where I can help pay for medical expenses and counseling expenses, different funeral claims and things for victims of crime in Navajo County. I manage a staff of about 2.5 right now. Hopefully we're trying to get some more funding and increase the amount of services that we can provide, and I'm glad to be here to talk to you today about domestic violence.
Well, we're happy to have you. Thank you, Roxanne. Hi, Abby.
Hi, good morning, Dawnafe. Thank you for having me here. My name's Abby Joplin. I'm the Native American Community Advocate for the White Mountain Safe House. My program is called the Stand Strong Project, but I've been with the Safe House for 6 years. We are a 26-bed shelter for women and children, but we do also help men. With my Stand Strong Project, I work closely with the White Mountain Apache tribe as well as the Navajo Nation. I do trainings and presentations as well, and community outreach to let everyone know that, you know, the Safe House is here for victims when they feel that they have nowhere to go. And I'm thankful to be here to bring awareness, because October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month.
Great. Well, it's great to have both of you here today and talking about such an important conversation, and to be recognition so community members are understanding, and also for those who might be suffering from domestic violence have an idea of maybe the services or places that they can go to seek help. So we're grateful that you're able to be here today. In some of the research and just kind of, you know, talking to other people about maybe the myths of domestic violence, there are several of them, and one that comes out over and over again is why doesn't she or he just leave? And so maybe you can talk a little bit about this myth and why that isn't so.
Sure. A lot of the times, you know, we hear people say, why do they go back? Why don't they just leave? There's multiple reasons, multiple different occasions why the victim doesn't leave the situation. You know, with the economy, you know, maybe he or she, the abuser is the bread maker of the family. So, you know, economy-wise, economic-wise, she doesn't have the means, or he doesn't have the means to leave the situation, as well as you know, the safety. You know, I think we were talking about, you know, with Roxanne being on the Fatality Review Board, the most times that the victim is at harm is when they're leaving the relationship that they're in. You know, the support network, having somewhere to go, having no one to run to talk to. And that's why, you know, as a survivor myself of domestic violence, I like to go do outreaches to let them know, hey, you know, there is a safe house. They may not want to come here, but we'll be providing other resources as well at the end of the show to know there are places that they can go. And safety planning, I feel, is very important when you're in a relationship of domestic violence, to say, you know what, these are the options I have. Let me start planning on it. You know, maybe putting some funding aside slowly to get to a safer place.
And you have to understand that there are aspects of emotional abuse that come hand in hand with physical abuse. Domestic violence isn't always physical. It usually stems because they have been so emotionally abused for so long that they're allowing this to occur in their lives. They think that they're worthless. They believe the things that this person is telling them. And so a lot of times with that comes a sense of guilt and intimidation, and that comes directly from the batterer. And that's a way that he's asserting, or she is asserting, control over an individual. And isolation. Another aspect of domestic violence is generally the batterer he or she makes a conscious decision to try to remove or isolate that victim from people that support that person, and they need to kind of reconnect with that support system, and they need help. It's almost impossible for a victim to get out of a situation like this without a support system. And that's why it's so important that we have resources like the S.A.F.E House where victims can go to help with safety planning and can get out safely.
Yeah, and a lot of times in society, I think like we always think, why is she going back? Why does he or she keep going back? But we should look at it from the other opposite end and say, if he or she loves that person, why are they harming them? You know, and that's the way we should look at it. But a lot of the time, it's victim blaming. You know, why don't they leave the situation?
And I think that's one of the great opportunities here, is kind of shedding some light on that and supporting victims. That if we're aware of victims in our family or have friendships, that we be a little more gentle and understanding to those circumstances. And certainly by what you've just communicated, that it's a pattern based over a long period of time. That it's not something that just happens one night and one day or whatever it might be. It is something that is happening over time, and that victim is becoming either mentally prohibited from being able to think maybe clearly, that it might be the pressure of trying to know what their future is going to look like. So there's a lot of pressures and a lot of things that we maybe are not too understanding of, and certainly taking the time to be understanding of the victim's perspective. And we always, one of the things that the services that you provide and others provide in our community allows for victims and also families who might be suffering from those issues, because certainly it's not just the victim who's suffering from those issues. If they're family members or they have, it's happening within the family, I know that those things can be issues as well. So we're grateful that you can provide those services. One of the things that you provided me was the power and control wheel. And I think that you have this up on your computer. So if you can talk a little bit about what that is and what that means.
Sure. Domestic violence is about power and control, having that power and control over the victim. And a lot of people in our society think that domestic violence is just physical abuse, you know, a hit, a slap, a pinch, but it's more than that, you know, in depth of that. We'll go over the power and control wheel. Roxanne and I will take it a section at a time maybe and kind of give examples. And the first one we want to go over is intimidation, you know, by making the victim feel afraid by using looks, you know, glares, gestures, you know, across the room showing a fist that he's going to hit her later, or smashing things, destroying the property. And it even goes as far as possibly abusing the pets even before abusing the victims, you know, displaying weapons, you know, so that's, you know, a form of intimidation for power and control.
The next one would be emotional abuse and putting somebody down. And I think that is, emotional abuse can be, I guess, many factors. It could, making that person feel some way responsible, like I hit you because you made me do this to you, and if you didn't behave this way, then you wouldn't see this reaction from me. And then that reinvests in that victim's mind that if I start to assert control or assert myself in this relationship, then I am making a bad decision, or I am not smart enough to do so, I'm not pretty enough, I can't get anybody else other than this. If I get out of this situation, I'm not worthy of a better situation. Those types of things are involved in emotional abuse. And I think that's kind of where domestic violence begins. When somebody enters a relationship with somebody who's going to commit domestic violence against that person, that batterer, that perpetrator, they know exactly what they're doing. I mean, I work in the criminal justice system, and I work with a lot of domestic violence victims, and I see similarities between batterers that of all of these aspects, I mean, these aspects on this power and control wheel are dead on. You can see the way that they behave in even courtroom settings, the way that they assert themselves against authority. A lot of times they don't have any type of self-awareness.
So, you know, the next one is isolation. And this is a red flag that I see families need to look at when they see their loved ones not being able to go to birthday parties or gatherings, Christmas gatherings, because the abuser just wants that person to themselves. Or you see a behavior where they were able to fix their hair or wear makeup, and then all of a sudden they can't because he's controlling everything that this person can or cannot do, and also limiting their involvement, you know, outside, maybe even at work, you know, just going to work just to do work and having to leave at a certain amount of time. So isolation I see is a red flag and key. So if you're a family member and you're used to having time with your siblings or someone, you know, and they stop doing it and they're giving excuses of why they can't attend you know, a birthday party or something, you know, definitely talk to that person, because, you know, like I said, isolation I see is a red flag of a person going into a relationship that is involving domestic violence, but they may not see it because they're so in love with that person that they're just seeing it like, oh, he's jealous or she's jealous, and they find it kind of like a way of like flattering, a way of showing love. So isolation is to me a big key.
So someone looking from the outside in a sense, and you recognize some of those traits, what would be the best thing to do?
I would say talk to them, you know, but also be, excuse me, talk to them, also be a listening ear, and not be judgmental. I see a lot of the time where victims are, they don't want to talk because they're afraid of, especially when it comes from family members, about how they're going to be perceived, how they're going to be looked at. Or is it a form of, they don't want me to be happy, they don't want me to be in a relationship where I'm finally finding love. So just being open-minded and just having that listening ear without judgment. And if it's hard to speak to a family member, you know, refer them to someone, a service provider that they can talk to and you know, get information about, because it's these, what we're providing today, the power and control wheel, and giving this information, it's good because a lot of people don't see that this is a form of violence.
Like even the abuse, the physical abuse, is just a way to assert control over somebody. On average, I think the national average is it takes a victim 7 times to leave a relationship before they actually are able to get out of that relationship. So they are making efforts to do so. So if you have a family member or a friend that is going through a domestic violence situation, it's important to just be there for them when they are really ready to exit that relationship, because they will need support.
And even if they don't, just like she said, 7 times, it can get tiresome sometimes, and we as service providers also can probably say, oh, you know, we have to help this person again, but you know, we have to realize that there are other reasons why they go back to their relationship. Yeah.
Those are great indicators in bringing recognition to community members, family members, friends, and identifying, and maybe even identifying our personal selves. Maybe we're in a relationship that we're not identifying that is abusive, and abusive to ourselves. So I think it's a great thing to bring some recognition to that and bring some in looking at those indicators.
Yes.
So if we go on, there are other points to the power and control wheel.
Minimizing, denying, and or blaming the victim. Minimizing is something you see quite often. It's like, well, you know, I didn't really hit you, I just slapped you a little. Or I don't abuse you because all I did was push you and you happened to fall on the ground. Really making light of the physical abuse that's going on in the relationship. That way the victim second guess, well, really was I abused? And that could help keep that victim from reaching out and trying to gather resources and keeping them kind of isolated. Also, there's a sense of embarrassment that can come along with this. A lot of victims don't want to tell people that this is happening to me, and we have to be very aware that that's something that they might be feeling as well. Not just fear, but what are people going to think? How am I allowing this to happen, allowing this situation to happen to me?
So the next one is using children, and I see this a lot, especially, you know, with the safe house, where the abuser will tell the victim, you know, if I'm going to take the kids away, or if they have visitations, the child being the messenger for the abuser to the victim. And, you know, a lot of that, and that's why I see the victim staying in the relationship is because of the child. But in a sense, they don't know that the child is also learning, because, you know, it's a learned behavior. And so when the victim does go back and the family is involved, you know, they want to keep their family unit together. So it's very important, I see, to have these red flags that were given out today as well. Sorry, I think that's all I have on using children. I don't know if you have anything else. I was like, okay.
And then the next cycle in the power and control wheel is economic abuse. And Abby had talked about that initially when she was introducing domestic violence in this segment. But it is something that is very substantial. If you have an individual who doesn't have the means to leave a relationship, if their only other option is to essentially become homeless or not be able to support their children, or even in the future think, I'm never going to make a job, have a job that can support my family, that's going to make it very difficult for that victim to feel like they can safely leave that relationship, especially if you have somebody who is going to be impoverished at that point. And anymore, I mean, for a regular family, a regular normal family relationship, it takes two incomes anymore to run that family. And so that victim really needs support. There is things out there that you know, people can get access to food stamps and welfare and shelter services, and we have Catholic Charities that provides a great amount of support. The local churches do. So there are ways for that victim to find money. I just want to encourage people, if they know somebody, that money should never be the reason that they stay in that relationship.
I think that speaks to a little of the things that Abby brought to our attention, in a sense of creating a plan. So if you're looking at, you know, what does that plan look like, and where can I get some of those resources? If it's monetary, if it's housing, if it's, you know, childcare, you know, all of those elements. Certainly it becomes where the person almost has to create a new life. And that becomes really challenging. And so when you talk about it in those words, you know, it really is, you could see why it's so important to bring awareness, because we certainly don't want individuals to be living in those circumstances, or to feel the weight that there is no way out, and that there aren't any resources for them.
Yes, definitely true. You know, and the next one that we're going to go to is male privileges. But the thing about this power and control wheel is it keeps saying her, you know, so she, her, but men are also victims, you know, and I do commend the male victims that I have worked with, because as, you know, a man, it takes a lot to say, hey, you know, I am the victim and my wife is the abuser, or a girlfriend is the abuser. And it's coming, men are coming out more saying that they are, and I commend them. But when it comes to male privileges, you know, it's when the man is defining the roles and saying, you know, I'm the boss, or I'm the one that's working. You got to do what I say, because that's what women do, you know, and you got to be home, take care of the children. You know, when men abuse that and use that often in a relationship, that is a form of power control, and it is domestic violence, you know, so that's that section.
And I guess the last section on the power and control wheel is coercion and threats. Making and or carrying out threats to do something to hurt the other person. I mean, threatening can be a lot of things. It can be, I'm going to threaten your job that you do drugs, I'm going to call your boss and tell him that they need to drug test you and you do drugs. That way you lose your job if you continue this behavior, or if you don't do what I say, that type of thing, to assert control. It can also be, I'm going to kill you. I am going to kill your family. I'm going to kill all of our family and our children and myself. Those are huge fears that the victim has. Those things are going to happen, and when they're constantly being told that if you don't behave in this certain way, I'm going to carry out these threats, then it reinforces them to stay in that relationship, which is very dangerous.
And I think one of the things that we talked about prior to this was the red flags, I guess, that come up, and also at that point when an abuse or a victim decides to leave, that point becomes the greatest point of severity. I think one of those, in looking at the indicators and looking at when a victim decides to leave, that at that point there are certainly that person needs a lot of support, that person needs friends reaching out, that they need family members, that they need all of the services that you provide, because certainly we don't want to see them in a more severe situation. And so what are some of those things that you were talking about? You were mentioning risk factors.
Well, there's a few things that, I mean, there's different levels of domestic violence, and when we are considering risk, the risk of a victim is continually changing based off of the circumstances in their lives. I mean, they could be at severe risk very early on in their relationship and then at a lower level risk later on, because it's asserting this, oh, well, I'm going to control you, I'm going to threaten you, I'm going to intimidate you, all of a sudden I'm sorry, that type of thing. But there are national statistics that these cases have been looked at, and if these things are occurring in a relationship, then that victim is at a substantially higher likelihood of being a victim of a fatality. Some of those aspects include if the batterer owns or possesses a firearm, if at any point in the relationship that victim has been strangled. Strangulation, just since I worked at the county attorney's office within the last 6 years, used to be a misdemeanor offense, and we are now learning that there is a substantially greater risk to strangulation than was ever considered before, and it's now a class 4 felony offense. But with strangulation, you also don't leave a lot of bruising or marking. You could even smother somebody with a pillow and you would see no, bruises or anything on that individual. So it is a tool that some batterers use, and they can become so good at it that at the point that they strangle them, they know exactly when to release pressure that victim comes conscious yet again. So that also sexual abuse, if that victim has been abused sexually by their partner, that they are at a substantially higher risk. Those are a few things to kind of keep a lookout for, because those victims could become victims of a fatality. I mean, we can never predict if they will be a fatality or not, but these are some of the things we look for.
Well, we're going to wrap up, but I want to just speak to the fact that it's an important conversation for us to have. Certainly a challenging one, where there's many factors involved. You have family members who are involved, you have a person's livelihood, and it could be the livelihood of 2 individuals and the family members who live with that family. And so I'm grateful that you had the opportunity to be here to share some of those things, and for us to be aware as community members of what that looks like. For the month of October, we are recognizing domestic violence and bringing awareness to it. So here at Navajo County, that we're grateful that we can do that with you. I think, what was the date, Abby? Was National...
it was
October 15th.
October 15th. Is the National Day of Recognition for Domestic Violence.
Wear Purple Day.
And Wear Purple Day.
So we want everybody to wear purple in Navajo County, right?
Yes.
And you can see Abby looks great.
She does.
Thank you for bringing some sparkle to our room today. But those of you who are in the community, I certainly hope that we provided some information that's useful to you today. And if you have a family member or you're dealing with domestic violence in your home, that here are great resources and two great women who are there to being able to reach out to and to help in whatever the circumstances may be. And we hope that you will join us next month. And thank you, ladies. And I will be wearing purple on October 15th.
Thank you.